Point-and-click horror is a staple that has carried itself over the years without fail, from titles such as 1998's Sanitarium to 2015's Rambles. The genre of point-and-click horror games is certainly something that is far from fizzled out. Though this genre is far from forgotten, I'd like to acknowledge the two games I bring up are also labeled as psychological horror. Psychological horror is a very vast concept, with many people having differing views of what makes up the genre, which is not the same as what scares them personally. When I started on this series, I was heavily discouraged and quite honestly had incredibly low hopes for how the series portrays horror. This was because of the first game being a visual novel and my own disinterest towards the genre. However, the first game was quick to make me rather impressed with how it handled itself, and hooked me in enough to play its second game, which happens to be tonight's topic. Good evening, I'm Synn, and welcome to Horror and Chill, the lovely online web series where I talk about a horror-related topic and the vibes are chill. Tonight's topic? Milk outside a bag of milk. Now, this game is a direct sequel, and while I wouldn't say you have to play the first one, it does help quite a bit in understanding the very strange world and being familiar with how things work here. I do already have a video on the first game, so if you'd like to experience that, it's there for you to check out and return to this one. Awkward pause. Okay, cool. So, Milk Outside a Bag of Milk, or Milk 2, as it is more easily referred to, is the sequel to the first game conveniently named Milk Inside a Bag of Milk. Milk 1 was about this unnamed girl, also known as Milk Girl or Milk-chan, going to get milk. We followed her as a voice inside her head, playing pretend with her as she remarks about wanting to be a visual novel character to help get the task done. Hence why the first game was a visual novel. This game, however, is a supposed point-and-click adventure because the girl suggested it, though still relies heavily on the visual novel aspects from the first. Before we jump too far ahead, we have to witness the intro to the game. I'll just let you watch it first before I add any form of elaboration. The intro gives us a recap of the first game, featuring the girl counting her steps, grabbing the milk, being unsure how to talk to the cashier, and finally going home, including her small remark of "yes, mother" to the lovely being we've all come to adore, known as Mother. Aww. Passing the intro recollection animation, we are brought to a sight of the girl's silhouette being surrounded by shadows. I can talk about the visuals later on, but you know I'm definitely going to talk about them at some point because God, I love them so much. The girl walks past the shadows that dash all around her, playfully dancing about without care. One brushes past her and she smiles, paying it no mind, noting that it's easy to lose track of time spinning in a joyous dance, but she was told to go to bed. She walks past the kitchen and describes feeling a chilling air coming from the other side of the door. That, her first thought, is of a living corpse blowing into the keyhole, laughing mockingly. Then she laughs and says, "That's so silly." She's sure they have no corpses in their kitchen. She knows they've never had any corpses in their kitchen. She's absolutely sure of that. So reassuring. She suddenly breaks into a run towards the closed door. The shadows intensify in their dancing that seems to be swirling around her. She doesn't know if they are trying to stop her or calm her down. She doesn't know, but it doesn't matter right now, saying, "Don't you get it?" Like a desperate pleading cry for us to scrape together some form of understanding for her situation. As she runs, she tries to wave her hands around to try and chase away the shadows. She realizes she won't be able to stop in time and decides that she's got no other choice but to break down the door. As she goes, she notes that if somebody is inside, she'll surely scare them to death, or how could she scare someone to death who's already dead? What if it revives them? She doesn't want that. What does she do? She couldn't fully complete her thought when her shoulder hits the door and it flies open. We get this amazing shot mimicking the first game's game over and ending scene of the main character's face. Her eyes are no longer disinterested, rather they are quite disturbed, seemingly relieved only a hair by the fact that there wasn't a living corpse inside her home. However, the bag of milk she bought today was sitting in the middle of the table, apparently watching her with its unblinking eyes. She stares right back, and nothing happens. Though, what did she expect? Gratitude? Has she done something that warranted it? A bag of milk probably doesn't care where it is. She continues saying, on the other hand, nobody would drink the milk inside the store, which means she took it from the safest place in the world and into the scary unknown, apologizing to the poor thing. Her constant remarks to things around her imply she views everything as having some form of sentience, the same way you would when you stub your toe on a table and apologize to the table. She turns away in shame and leaves the room in a hurry, saying she only brings others trouble. Aww. She walks towards her room through a narrow corridor. Then we get to see everyone's favorite face. Mother. Except it's not just as Mother as how we remember her from the last game. Much like how the girl seemingly has a tone shift in how she's portrayed, Mother is now a small face compared to one taking up a decent portion of the screen. However, that doesn't last for long. We see brief flashes of Mother's shadowy figure in the doorway. Her body seems to be now writhing like some form of monster, and this animalistic description doesn't stop there. Milk Girl goes on to describe the encounter as meeting a formless creature at the door. It locks her in its clutches and starts sniffing every inch of her body like a hungry dog. She's not struggling. She knows it's useless and just stays silent, enduring its tight grip that stops her from moving. We transition to see Mother up close and personal, her doll-like face never changing in its tranquil, unnerving gaze. Thick tendril fingers clasped around her upper forearm. Her body is a dark mask, almost like it's covered in dark hair, guessing by the edges. But it could just be a wispy effect like what the shadowy monsters have. She holds Milk Girl's arms, causing her veins to become a bit more prominent. Our girl describes that the creature holds out its ugly paws, bearing a single claw, thin and sharp like a blade. "Again?" she asks. She stares into the monster's bottomless eye sockets as it cackles out for her to not move. The creature squeezes her hands until her veins start bulging. We keep staring into the black cavities where its eyes should be, ignoring any and all pain, as if this were our normal occurrence. "I've promised so many times." "Stay put." The creature's claw pierces her arm. She remarks how she doesn't feel anything other than the barely discernible crawling under her skin. The ring of tightly sprung sinews and the claw injecting its venom into her. "It hurts." She began to shake. A white veil appears across her eyes. Her fingers cramp and start twitching frantically. Losing control of her body, she collapses to the floor slowly like a pastime butt. Why do I feel so hot?" She speaks of how she feels her blood boiling up. Strong shivers run through her body, paralyzing every cell while her veins and arteries heat up, almost bursting from the pressure. She tries screaming, but all that spews from her lips is a thick, milky foam. The creature notices it and throws itself at her in anger, grabbing her by the throat while keeping its poisonous claw inside her arm. "Kill me! Kill me!" she cries out. Hysterical screams resound through the corridor. In a fit of madness, the creature starts scratching her neck. Bright splashes fly everywhere, hitting the walls. The girl tries to imprint where every drop falls so she can gather them all later, muttering in her mind that she needs to remember. A new wave of pain hits her, and everything goes dark. So, what was literally any of that? Well, to explain it as best as I personally can, keep in mind that this is merely my interpretation of what happened, we just witnessed a schizophrenic and very mentally unwell girl's interpretation of her abusive mother giving her an EpiPen after she entered anaphylactic shock, then choking her daughter and letting her fall to the ground as the EpiPen didn't get a chance to properly work before the girl is already out cold. Milk Girl sees her mother as a monster, possibly because of her past with her father, and perhaps because of her father taking his own life due to their familial issues. Perhaps she always saw her mother like this, a monster. One that noticeably lacks eyes, as we are always drawn back to Mother's hollow eyes. It is one of the biggest noticeable things about her. Mother's design has always also been this porcelain doll look, with these two hollow eyes that stare both at you and through you. The EpiPen is described as a venomous claw because it seems like whenever the girl is administered her EpiPen, it's always very late into her anaphylactic state, hence why she was vomiting up a milky foam and complaining about her body getting hot, which could be equated to the sudden surge of chemicals that anaphylaxis causes. However, the mother is administering it in the wrong place as well. Administering the EpiPen in the arm can cause a myriad of worse side effects like anxiety, restlessness, tiredness or weakness, confusion, and many, many more. Milk Girl is already mentally ill, as we know she has at least schizophrenia and a personality disorder. The intense side effects of a poorly administered EpiPen that could be happening very often could be even worse for her mental state, worsening it to a drastic means and giving her side effects that may be unbeknownst to us. Along with that, it's clear she's used to this sort of abuse, as she remarks about already knowing not to fight her mother's inspection of her, pairing this with her tiny remark of, "Again?" And we get an even clearer picture of the mother and girl having been through this song and dance many times over and over. With the implication of the mother choking out her daughter and letting her collapse on the ground, it's not unfathomable that the mother is at most physically abusive to her daughter and at least belittling or simply completely negligent of her daughter. I'll be able to help piece together the story later on, so for now we return to the terrifying scene. "Say it. I'll never drink milk ever again," the monster calls to us. She starts to speak. Say it. "I'll never drink milk ever again." The mother forces us to repeat the phrase, reinstating that we'll never drink milk again in a grand cry. After moments of silence and darkness from our final cry, we fade into our girl standing in her bedroom, toothbrush in her mouth, tired eyes. Her hair is unevenly cut as she gazes at her reflection. A cool touch this game includes is most everything in the game besides the girl herself has this strange tinted purple or sharp red accenting it. In the first game, the offhanded remark in a deeper conversation with the girl reveals she sees everything in red, hence why the display of the game was the way it was, being all pink and such. The girl now speaks of how she's tired of all this fuss, thankfully feeling comfortable and warm in her room. We can note that mentions of sounds coming from the outside don't make her anxious at all. The sudden shift could be a substitute acknowledgement of her waking up in her room after passing out from being in anaphylactic shock, probably brought there by her mother. The tonal shift isn't too sharp, as we can assume her life is always this chaotic, and if you yourself have experienced chaotic and unstable homes, going from very intense interactions to something as mundane as brushing your teeth isn't as phasing as you'd believe. Milk Girl explains her mother told her to go to bed, and so she needs to perform all the needed preparations. She's washed her face, and now she stands in front of a mirror with a toothbrush in her mouth. She looks at her reflection. She has no desire to sleep, saying, "Yeah, I get how you feel." She muses about the time the last minutes before she slept were her favorite time of day, loving the anticipation of the inevitable moment that reality and the dream world clash. She wonders about how she lived through the day for it. Her biggest dream was to sleep all day long, how it would have been so cool, but that the dreams always slowly but surely slipped away, as if somebody had fished them out of her head. one after another, until nothing was left. And now she has to sleep again, but she doesn't feel any need for it. We then transition to a very skewed image of her sink. Pill bottles line the sink's edge, all varying in how they are filled. Some filled to the top, some are completely empty. She tells of how she usually reaches for her pills when she's done with her face, but she has no idea how they work separately since she always swallows them in a bundle without thinking. Now she wants to have a better look at it being the pills. She wants to twirl them between her fingers, to chew on it. I'd do anything to stall for just a little bit more time. It's such a solemn and soft remark from the girl. This game has many strengths, and of course many weaknesses, which varies from how everyone sees the game. But one thing that touches a part of my soul is just how it humanizes the girl. Games currently have a small issue where they often lack creating a human protagonist. Even if the protagonist isn't technically a human in their game, they can fail at creating a protagonist that people can find a piece of themselves in, or a part where they can understand how the character works. Now, a weakness that may show through for this game and its characterization of the main character is that it's easy to relate to her if you've lived through rough times. If you have had mental struggles or have had self-esteem issues, things she says can ring like a distant echo or a comforting voice to you. Something that will fit a large group of people, but also will not. This game is not for everyone, but the people who it is seemingly for will understand the game in a sentimental and very deep way. That's not to say you have to have had rough times to relate to the character or enjoy the character, but I would be rather naive to say that it's not easier to relate to the character when you have felt how she's felt. Another fascinating thing about this game that I'd like to mention is that this game has a moving background. In fact, it doesn't just have a different background for 1 or 2 scenes, it has 89 backgrounds it can cycle through, making it so that every time you play the game, your experience is personalized to some degree. Which is just a little touch I quite enjoy. Okay, mini ramble over, on to the rest of the silly haha psychological horror game. Milk Girl begins to talk about her pills, describing the first as a smooth, protruded red capsule looking at her. Covered in a murky, semi-transparent film, but she can still discern its contents. So what do we have inside you? She gently presses on the capsule from both sides, and to her surprise, it turns out to be soft and squishy. Pitching it further, the capsule pops, sticky, bright red liquid pouring out, which she does not approve of, calling it filthy. Twice. Throwing the vial-popped pill into the trash, she begins to rigorously wash her hands, stating there's no way she's drinking that. Next is a flat pill of the same blood-red color. There are some letters printed out onto it. Milk Girl chimes, "Oh, I get it," explaining that this is the medicine that makes her really sleepy. But it's not the type of sleep she wants. It's not like that at all. It's fake. She starts to grow fervent and expresses that she doesn't even want to look at it, casting it into the waste bin as well. The next half an hour goes by in a similar fashion, her monologue tells us, studying every pill from all sides before finding a reason to not swallow it. Milk Girl hums about inventing her own medicine instead, and enjoys swallowing them one after another, letting herself drown in their healing effects, starting to express how she feels in simple statements. Hey, my neck doesn't hurt anymore. Hey, my hand doesn't hurt anymore. Hey, my head doesn't hurt anymore. Hey, my heart doesn't hurt anymore. Hey, my stomach doesn't hurt anymore. Hey, my eyes don't hurt anymore. Milk Girl chimes about how she didn't think of it earlier. It's so simple, and that she needs to brag about it to someone right away. But not to her mother, she'll just scold her. That, and she's sure she's already asleep, so she doesn't want to disturb her without reason. She'll think of something herself. She thinks to herself, just wanting some small talk, wondering who's going to be her conversation partner. We transition to a void, and then we see a simple phrase. Hey. Selecting it brings us a room, a text box, and a proper talk sprite of our girl. We are brought back to the interactive part of the game, playing the voice of the girl that appears in her mind because of the medicine she takes. She greets us with a, "Hey, long time no see." We are brought to our typical options. It hasn't even been an hour, dummy. And You know, we're only supposed to meet once per day, right? Indifferently, she huffs about her voice sounding grim, and this part of the game is where I have to specify a little thing. So a lot of this game, either option will give you the same reaction, with very specific ones giving you smaller, different responses. However, depending on the options you select, you can end up triggering certain events. These events can affect what ending you get. I felt the need to mention this as I know some people dislike the idea that your choice options could not affect the ending. They do, it's just more causing events rather than your active dialogue with Milk Girl to a degree. Milk Girl hums about how naturally she's read the manual. Judging by the pictures, the overdose side effects are the usual headaches, dizziness, exhaustion, basically nothing she can't handle by herself. After all, she knows how to do it. We retort that she didn't reply, and she asks, "Aren't you even a little bit happy? Not even the slightest bit?" With a saddened but also anxious expression. As usual, your responses are very neglectful to how she feels, being brash and standoffish. We can either say no, or that we're pretty exhausted after today. If we choose the latter, it causes her to say that's not true. We tell her she needs to go to bed. She's quick to refuse, saying we've been in control for way too long already. It's her turn now. We give her the remark that we'll just stay silent until the medicine's effects wear off. To which she panics, stating that we can't do that. We need to do our best to make her feel better. We hum that it's exactly what we're doing, and she sighs out, "What a bully," then asks why she's even worried about this, chiming that in reality she doesn't need us at all. We are enthused by your comment. She continues on by saying that she feels energetic and great, which means she can do anything, and we can only watch and agonize over our uselessness. She snickers and says how she can imagine how angry we are right now. We can choose to say we're all beside ourselves, or ask what made her so happy all of a sudden. If we pick the first option, we'll then say, by the way, she's the one who's useless. I feel bad. I hate being mean to her. I know it's for the game and it's supposed to be a manifestation of her own inner thoughts towards herself, but I hate being mean to her. So we call her useless and pathetic, and she retorts that we shouldn't even try ruining her mood. She wants to have fun while we're together. We ask if she's the one calling the shots now, and she says yeah. We hum about how long she can last. Agreeing, she then goes silent and mumbles out a small, "I." After a second, she asks if she's really that pathetic. We keep her in silence, and she begs us to say something. Her monologue shows she can feel tears streaming down her cheeks, hanging from her chin and then falling upon her clothes, burning holes in them. We sigh and say that that was fast, but not unexpected. She shoots back that at least she tried. We tell her to go wash her face, then we'll decide what to do with her. We transition to her bedroom sink once more. In front of the mirror again, she stares at her reflection, trying not to get distracted by the sneery looks on the walls. Trying not to drown in their giggling. But the version of her in the mirror also shows a creepy smile and bares her teeth at her. Little detail, the big blob beside the mirror here is actually her figure. You can tell from the tiny outlines of her sweater along the edge. It was just something I thought was cool. She shuts her eyes, but that doesn't help. It wouldn't even if she sunk through the floor. She starts counting in her mind, starting with 2 squared by 2 squared, a square squared, a square pyramid squared, a pyramidal structure cubed, a pyramidal structure hypercubed. She feels better, but her head is splitting apart now. We apologize for being rude, and she says it's not our fault. It's never our fault. We sigh she can keep on blaming herself, but don't overdo it. She says she doesn't know why. She thought she'd be able to take control. She was almost ready too. She was sure she'd be able to change something. After all, she was able to buy milk. We ought to know how challenging it was. We ask her if that's why she threw away the medicine. What a stupid decision, right? We say, whatever it was your decision. She responds with, "Does it even matter?" We can say yes, no, or what do you think? The girl goes on to explain about how she thought she could fight it on her own, yet the pain was only gone for a little bit and then tripled in force a while later. It hurts so bad. We can tell her to just drink her medicine, or we'll stop talking to her, or just say she knows what to do. Dejected, she reaches for the pills and takes them one after another, chasing away unpleasant visions that keep floating up in memory. She describes how her mind draws a terrifying picture, lumps of coagulated blood in a transparent coating traveling down her esophagus, scratching its soft walls, leaving behind furrows. She shakes her head violently. She doesn't care if it makes her feel dizzy or worsens her pain. She doesn't want to think about something so repulsive. We chime that she hasn't changed. She asks what we mean, and we say she's so afraid of being alone that it worries her so much more than pain. Yeah, I guess. And then she tosses the last pill into the air and catches it with her mouth. We transition to a memorable shot of the girl laying on the floor, a blank expression upon her face, gazing up at the ceiling. It's actually a shot they even recreated in the official cinematic trailer of the game for the Switch, which is just a little moment I enjoyed seeing brought to life. As she lays gazing up at the ceiling, we ask if she wants to talk about it. No, I've had enough of talking. We let her sit and stare up at the ceiling. As she continues staring, it eventually turns into us learning the plot of the main game. And I know it's a little sharp to suddenly jump into talking about the proper plot, but going through every single piece of dialogue within the game would make this video a little longer than properly needed. This could come back to bite me, but that's fine. So we learn our objective through Milk-chan wanting to collect her thoughts, wanting to lay them upon her ceiling in orderly rows. Though no matter how she placed or piled them, she'd end up throwing them off with her hand and starting over. The voice in her head suggests they personify the thoughts as cockroaches, but instead she chooses fireflies, and now we get to see her thoughts visualized for us. They're fireflies now, and start whirling all over the ceiling. After waiting for a special moment that never comes, she declares that she hates the fireflies. Then she jumps up and screams at them, which causes them to scatter. Welcome to the main focus of the game! Just as the game before was you helping the girl get a bag of milk, you now get to help her collect her thoughts. Though this time it's not a visual novel as she wants to be a point-and-click adventure character, mostly because she doesn't want a single thing in her room to be put out of order. From there you can explore her room and find fireflies, though there is one thing that can happen before any big major events. You can experience something called your first death. It's the scene featuring a flash of the girl seemingly being choked or choking herself. Though through the filters that flash over this moment, we can almost see the outline of what could be the milky white foam that she was talking about earlier in the encounter with her mother. After we see the choking scene, the girl goes on to describe how she rubs her eyes intensely, that they're itchy, with our voice seemingly compromised to some degree as we ask her why she's crying. She says her eyes are itchy, and we are presented with two options. Did you drink milk? Or, did he bring milk? Either one will result in her saying she wonders if she tears out all her eyelashes one after another will her eyes stop itching. She repeats, wondering if she tore out her eyelashes one by one, with us questioning what has she done. She says she needs to gather the glass and then have a bath, and then we say, here, drink some milk. It results in her screaming, no. We cut back to her room, Milk Girl now standing in the middle of it, gasping for air. She thinks she experienced death. This moment will be important later on. This is an event that is only key for one ending. All other endings you are meant to avoid triggering this event. Before we go in to talk about the endings of the game, we have to talk about the gameplay. Here's my very in-depth description of the gameplay. You point and click things. No one expected that! If the truth be told by mine of eldritch tongue, you do indeed have to inspect items around the girl's room. Though there is one thing you can't interact with. Hover your mouse over the milk cartons under the girl's sink. You're not going to be able to use them at all. Now you may say, Synn, why would someone have a sink in their room? Well, I can give you the reason I know of them being in homes. It's typically a European thing that was instilled a ways back in time, so that a majority of people in the home had access to fresh water. It's obviously fallen out of style with the times, but people who do have one nowadays don't seem to be all up in arms against them. That's at least my understanding, so I may be very wrong, or just have a very basic idea of things. If you want to understand it more, you should look it up on your own time. You can interact with a decent bit of things in the girl's room, from the pills on her sink to the small dangling lights by her window. Though the most noticeable things you can interact with are her laptop and her backpack that's hung up. Interacting with the laptop will give us the girl explaining her experience online, which goes oddly deeper than I expected. Frankly, her interests are quite relatable for most people who hang out online a lot. Games, drawing, an engineering calculator, and 3D modeling. She used to be on her computer for days until she entered the web. Though she wasn't lacking friends, she had a decent bundle for her interests. Her key thing was that she took the online presence of other people as merely bots, lines of code following an algorithm, but she still called them friends, saying anyone who had similar interests, whether she knew them or not, was a friend. She considered closing the computer as silencing them to some degree, ending the simulation. Then she met someone, and her computer was never shut. When we get her on the balcony to talk about this, she mentions that every word of her telling the story will cause her pain. Milk-chan met a person online with a boring icon and name, according to her. One that didn't follow the online rules. Rules that she says aren't written anywhere, but she was smart enough to figure out. She claims that this bot tricked her. He told her things like he was talking about someone else's life. He expected her to do the same, and so she did. He knew more about her than anyone in the world. Then, he ends up sending a bunch of bots to harass her. She says text and video generators get to work, and we can take this as people would take pictures of her when she was out and about, or maybe at school, and her name became more present online. This caused her to break down, feeling like eyes were constantly on her from walls and ceilings, and now the screens. She decided to put an end to it, but before we can hear what she had done, her hypothetical self hits the ground and shatters in a million pieces like a porcelain doll. This is an event that will only happen if you interact with the laptop and answer to her in a specific way. Another of the notable things you can interact with is her backpack. As we learned, she actually went to school! Though she never graduated, she tells multiple versions of how her last day at school went, starting as peaceful and gradually adding in small details, key phrases that recontextualize how things went that day. Piecing things together, and thanks to the fandom's wiki for more cohesive phrasing, the father goes to pick up the girl early, telling her that she needs to grow up. She doesn't understand and throws a fit. The teachers don't interfere because this is normal to them, assuming she has done something wrong. They go home in bitter silence, and on the way home, her father buys milk. Again. They go home. Mother is not there. Again. The two have dinner and go into their separate rooms. That was the girl's last day of school. Never graduating. Her backpack just hangs on the wall, stuck in another time that will never be pursued. Before we continue with the endings or dreams, we should probably talk about the parents. After all, parents are always an influence on us and how we turn out, and therefore it affects how game characters can act. I may have portrayed the mother earlier as the villain, to which she may be in Milk Girl's eyes, but overall from the context given in-game, she may not be as horrible as the daughter sees her. You see, the first game sets us up with the knowledge that the father in this family is gone, passing away by his own hand due to the issues within their family. What issues could they have been? We're not going to get the full picture, of course, but what we do get is still helpful in understanding even a little bit of what could have happened. The father and mother have a daughter who is allergic to milk, and ends up in an accident as we learn in the first game. This daughter may have already had some form of mental illness that could have been worsened or caused by the accident she experienced. The two have very different ways in dealing with the girl's issues, especially regarding her allergy. The father, we can infer, is trying to force her to drink milk, which will cause her to vomit and get even more sick, whilst the mother actively tries to keep her away from milk, explaining why she was stabbing the girl with the EpiPen at the start of the game. Since the girl had bought milk, she may have assumed she was meant to drink it, as her father may have forced her to do so. trying to force her body to build an immunity to it, which wasn't working. Using the fact he forced her to drink milk, we could also make a hypothetical that he's also opposed to her taking medicine, while the mother is the one who makes sure she gets the medicine that helps her, even writing down the dosage and symptoms on notes. The mother wants to medicate her daughter for her mental illnesses and keep her away from milk to ensure she doesn't get sick. Now this opens a very large can of worms because these are two viewpoints people can have in real life. Some people prefer trying to do oral immunotherapy in order to help themselves build an immunity, typically against foods that they have an allergic reaction to, while some simply cut the food type out of their diet. Some people choose to medicate themselves in order to help with mental illnesses, or some just don't under pretenses or preconceived notions. These viewpoints could have easily caused the intense family issues that the girl references in the first game. Calling back to the first death experience, that scene is a shocking combination of alarm and also relief. The girl choking herself or being choked is something you don't expect so suddenly. Along with that, it's prompted by the fact that the voice in her mind doesn't understand why it didn't know what she was thinking when she was laying on the floor, that it was weird. It's also a very shocking event that can catch you by surprise, and is one you actually have to avoid for a lot of endings within the game. Now that we've covered the main portion of the game and made hypotheses about what the girl's home life could be like, what happens when we complete our objective, when we collect the girl's thoughts or fireflies? Well, she asks us with her hands to tell her a bedtime story. We call this silly and meaningless. She says we don't know what we're talking about, and it fades into darkness, leading into whatever dream we unlock by our actions during the day. There are 5 different dreams in Milk 2, each with their own special combination of things to obtain them. Originally there was a 6th ending or piece of prologue, as implied by this scrapped image of curtain milk with a spiral behind it. Returning to the point, the dreams are heavily reflective of different things about Milk Girl in her many differing parts. They spark many theories as to what her dreams or endings could mean. The first dream is the game's default ending, called the shop ending. It shows us the very iconic pink pixelated art style of the first game, following Milk Girl and this new character, a boy named Treska. As it goes, we are now on our way to get milk with this new character. As our text and tone imply, Milk Girl in her dream is taking the place of the voice or the player's role in the first game. As we go, we walk alongside Treska and eventually come to the store, where we have a small bit about the store having a sign saying they close in 20 minutes. Milk Girl and Treska have a moment where they talk about it, and come to the conclusion that the store must have a guy who comes out to switch out the sign every 5 minutes. They're proven right, and then usher into the store to get what they came for. Milk Girl takes the lead because Treska apparently doesn't know where the milk section is. Treska chimes about asking someone for help, and when he approaches a customer, he somehow freezes up. Milk Girl comes to resolve the situation as the customer asks, "Is he yours?" Fun fact! The customer has the same sound as the customer we meet in the first game. Yes, I'm sorry. Treska is stunned, his eyes spiraling as he shakes. As the girl tries to figure out what caused Treska to be so afraid, he shouts, "No, not again," and begins screaming. Milk Girl covers his mouth and says, "Can't you act normal?" Treska talks about how she doesn't understand, and she retorts how she doesn't understand anything, but she knows annoying other people is wrong. Treska calls the girl mean and runs off. We end up finding him at the cash register, standing there looking down, seemingly unaware of what to do. A carton of milk on the counter, the cashier seems to be exceedingly frustrated with him. Milk Girl ends up having to pay extra for causing a waiting fee, and one of the customers says she should have left him at home. As the two begin their walk home, Treska asks if she likes ice cream. She says no, and she notices a light glimmer in his eye that quickly goes out. He walks toward the highway, turns towards her, and recreates the game's game over screen you see in the first game, saying, "It seems like you're not helping me at all." A new playful light in his eyes, and the waking up scene plays. I'll address the waking up scene after I discuss all the endings. So, what can we take away from the shop dream? Taking in the fact that this game follows moments after the first game, that means that this girl is dreaming of earlier in the evening. It's an ending that at least lets us see how the girl interacts with others. While annoyed by Tresca, she doesn't act in a strange manner, brash at best. This ending brings a sort of familiarity. If I had to make a grim inference, the dream may end with Tresca being hit by a car. As we know in the first game, the girl thinks she's being charged by a bear, but it's actually a truck. By the two glowing lights behind Tresca's head in the final shot of him, it doesn't take too much to make that kind of connection. This could be her mind's way of decompressing everything that happened that day, and putting the girl in place of her split personality or the player. It allows her to see things a little more clearly, albeit through Tresca. The next ending is a sort of mix of an ending. It's called the phone or pizza ending depending on who you ask. There's an Easter egg connected to this ending, which is about Milk Girl apparently having to wait for a call. I myself only know of this little Easter egg because of the wiki, so if you want to check it out, you can read the full Russian to English translation there. Now for the ending in the game. The ending follows the girl talking to a pizzeria's text message ordering system. She texts it talking about how the world is very empty, but she entertains herself with her thoughts. Talking to the bot, who in this case most likely is a bot, she continues to talk about how empty her mind is aside from her thoughts, entertaining herself while being alone. She talks about wanting her thoughts to have space, but notes that there has to be an end, though she tries to console the idea by saying she knows it sounds scary, but it's not as scary as constantly existing among the void, saying this place is safe, nothing bad will happen, but nothing good will happen either. At some point she mentions a door, saying it would be easier if she had one, which is a nod to a different ending we'll talk about soon. In this entire ending, the girl constantly repeats about her feeling neither good nor bad, about the world being a grand void, how her mind is a void. This importance on her feeling neither good nor bad pushes us as we watch her travel between scenes. A room of chairs with some plants looking almost like a doctor's office. Then she's running down a street, then at a store, then walking home. She goes from walking home to being at train tracks, and then in front of a no sign. And then she enters a session timeout. And she wakes up. While not as elaborate as the shop scene, we can still pull from this ending. The constant repetition of the girl not being able to feel either good or bad continues as the biggest thread throughout the ending. This is indifference, the inability to feel strongly. Otherwise, put as, at least for this case, apathy or emotional blunting, which can be a result of the medications the girl takes. Emotional blunting is typically a numb feeling that replaces your typical emotional responses, causing a solid indifference to the world, which could explain why the girl continuously repeats how she doesn't feel one way or the other. Her speaking to a pizza bot merely helps us get a better understanding as to why she sees everyone online as just bots. Apathy may be harsher to take into consideration, as she does have motivation to do things, but lacks an emotional response to things or can't really choose. The third ending is the mirror ending, the most iconic ending for having the most warped imagery of the girl. This ending has the girl staring at herself in the mirror, which starts normal and just gets warped as it replays the same conversation over and over again. The reflection being a reflection of possibly her inner thoughts on how she views herself. The interaction only changes when she doesn't see her face, saying she feels wonderful today and can't wait for her first day at school. The dream ends with her staring at herself the same way the player is seeing her, followed by her waking up. This dream is more akin to a nightmare, exposing the girl's own personal views of herself with constant warped features on her face, only happy when she has absolutely none, showing that she has such a poor self-image that not seeing herself would make her happier than anything else. Her own split voice even talks down to her and belittles her. It's not hard to make the assumption that she doesn't view herself as even worthy of being treated properly, and thus cannot view herself as a human, just a being of some kind. The fourth ending is the room and field ending. This ending has the girl wake up in a room, one she compares first to a coffin. It's a vast darkness with only a doorway to accompany her. Remember when I said a dream earlier would be referencing this? Well, here it is. Milk Girl tries to run towards the walls, but they recede from her faster than she can run, leaving her aimlessly trapped in the dark. When she tries to approach the door, it too begins to recede from her. She begins to run after it, forcing herself to do it. While at first it had sounded like a monster was behind the door, there was now a voice. She chases after the voice, not wanting it to stop, even throws herself to try and capture the door's handle. She fails and ends up being hurt badly from sliding upon the floor. She gets up, chases the door again, and this time when she opens the handle, she finds herself laying in a field. While she wanders the empty field, she ends up noticing a silhouette in the distance, one she thought could be a stone or a tree. Calling out to it, she starts to repeat the same dialogue that the voice behind the door called to her. She starts to run again, this time away from the shadow. It chases her, but never moves. Soon, in her final scream for it to go away, the world is engulfed in a monstrous inky darkness, and she wakes up. This ending is more vague, left up to interpretation. It's harder to piece together what it could really mean. The emptiness could represent her own mind, as she often talks about her mind having a lot of space. The door could be her accessing a part of herself that is sealed away, or perhaps a new opportunity, like being able to go out and buy milk by herself. Though laying in the field could mean many things. Growth, like being able to go to the store as previously stated. The shadow being could also almost represent the voice in her mind that's caused by her medications, a part of herself locked away that she doesn't know how to face. It's a very open-ended ending, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. Open-ended endings allow you to guess, and that lets you get more connected to the media you like. The fifth ending is the stairs ending, and this ending is by far the most unsettling one to me personally. Milk Girl finds herself on a large column, one that goes up and down infinitely. She presses herself into the wall, hoping she freezes to it, though in the midst of her seeing rows upon rows of the same columns she herself is on, we get a quote from Mozek, an opera and a story about a man who murders his wife after learning she had an affair, and then drowning himself in hysteria. Just a very peculiar thing to include. The other quotes that appear during the cosmic being's warping are even more unusual. The girl decides to proceed down the spiraling staircase, the rants continue, and the girl wakes up. Within this dream, near the end, there's a moment where the thoughts tell her to grow up. This gave me the idea that perhaps this is a part of the conversation she was having with her father on her last day of school. It rants, and it almost feels like parts of the conversation are missing. Small but important parts. This entire part is achromatic. It's also alluding that there's some cosmic force controlling the girl, or at least forcing her to walk down the stairway, to which she was heavily opposed. These dreams all end the same way, with the girl sitting up in her sleeping bag, teary-eyed. She then brings her hands up to rub her eyes, though not before having a small look of almost relief. The next shot we see is the giant O, or black hole, something she expressed being terrified of in the first game. She stares directly at it, her eyes trained on the O for a good bit of time before the game ends and the credits roll. So what can we really learn from the experience of milk outside a bag of milk? What does it show us? What exactly is wrong with Milk-chan? Well, there isn't really a lot to learn from Milk 2, but I would say it's a game that portrays psychological horror in a way I wish more games did, preying upon just how warped our minds can get, but also showing us how human we can be. The story within the game is also investing to those who may not even really like visual novels. The game is not as heavily as point and click as it could have been, but that to me doesn't dampen the experience. Games that display warped minds and warped people are always a treat to me, because horror can often get boxed in on itself, that you can only do this, that, or the other to be deemed terrifying. A monster has to be present, we have to be lost in a vast unknown space, when really playing upon how our mind can be a terrifying and strange place is far more investing. I don't think the game really ends in a positive or negative light either. It ends on seeing Milk-chan wake up teary-eyed and then facing her fear. There are some folks who believe that she was almost smiling in the waking up scene, and I can kinda see that. Visually, not really, because it does just look like she's crying, but I can understand the notion that she's been wanting to have dreams again. And we help her with that no matter the ending, so the relief to give her a dream could very easily be enough for her, especially for her to then turn and suddenly gaze upon something that caused her such deep fear in the first game. There is a suspicion of the main character having obsessive-compulsive disorder and autism. While it's the most definite that she has schizophrenia and a personality disorder of some kind, OCD is something out of my comfort zone to really pinpoint. but I can address the presumption/headcanon that Milk-chan could have autism. There are many small mannerisms like taking things literally, her very straightforward thinking, her need for things to be a certain way, her need for routine, especially when she talks about having her certain way of how she ends her nights. In an environment of chaos, we oftentimes look for some way to bring some sense of stability and control. This is shown in her developing routines, a specific way we choose to do things. While this is not a specifically autistic trait, it is one that we can count as due to many autistic people needing some form of routine for a bundle of things. Though we can also count this as just part of her dealing with her traumatic environment. Another thing to this is her talking about how she is smart enough to figure out the silent rules of the internet. Autistic people can often have a hard time understanding indirect or silent messages or rules within social situations, which can lead to them misinterpreting and/or having poor social skills. Her noting this as being smart enough to figure it out is merely her acknowledging she could figure out and understand the silent rules, something autistic people may do in order to mask more effectively. All these small things could help hint that she could very well be at least a heavily autistic coded character. I won't go heavily in depth, although I could, but at most I can say to ignore the fact she has autistic traits would be very naive. I think it's a possibility, but I am not the developer, so we may never truly know. Wow, that was an experience. I mean that as endearingly as possible. If the video length or overall tone I've had hasn't spelled it out yet, I absolutely adore this game. Is it revolutionary? No, but it has a feeling and tone that strikes such a deep chord in me. Everyone has their strange or odd little comforts, and this is mine. It just scratches that little itch in my brain, and it's such an idle interest of mine that I've been so excited to share with others. Don't get me wrong, this game is definitely for those who like visual novels and strangeness, and if it's not your cup of tea, I completely understand. This is simply my cup of tea, and I will gladly sip it. The game is $8.99 on Steam, and if you play for only one or two of the endings, you get about 1 to 2 hours of gameplay. I've gotten 5 hours out of it because I played for all the achievements/endings. The OST is free on Steam as well, and I suggest giving it a listen. It has a very distinct sound that is reminiscent of games like Yume Nikki or Omori. The game is a surreal experience, and if you enjoy an experience like the one in this video, I suggest checking it out for yourself. The visuals in the game have an anime-inspired style, but I feel they fit very well together. They're just overall very appealing to look at, and the strange or unnerving things that appear in the game don't cause a break in the style. You don't have to be overly graphic with things to startle people. While not a very intense point-and-click, which granted it's not marketed as one, it would have been nice to see more of the style when the main character says she wants to be a point-and-click adventure game. Well, that was a big video of me essentially going, here's my hyperfixation, please consume it and understand my vision. If you have had any intriguing games you'd like me to talk about, let me know below. I do talk about things other than horror, I promise, so if you have a game in general you'd like me to cover, let me know. If this game sparked your curiosity, or you have any theories or hypotheticals referring to the game itself, I'd love to hear them. I love discussions about games, especially when it comes to the interpretation of these kinds of games that leave everything up in the air. And for now, I'll be seeing you all till next time. Remember, drink water, and good night.